Hello, everyone. To those just tuning in, welcome. To those who've been checking out sessions throughout the day, welcome back. We hope you're enjoying the content and looking forward to more awesome presentations coming up. A big thank you to our partners and speakers for helping us deliver a fantastic program. A quick reminder to join our Slack channel to interact with other attendees and join selected speakers for Q&A. You can find the link in the menu at the top of this page. Happy viewing.
All right, thank you all for joining me for this talk. I'm really excited to get to share my ideas with you today. I work in digital health and have a subspecialty in mental health and specifically around substance abuse. So for me, it's really vital to understand motivation and how to get users to make very difficult changes in their lives. And I want to share with you the knowledge that I've gained through doing that to apply it more broadly to all products. My intention for this talk is for you guys to walk away with some more tools to evaluate feature ideas that may come up on your team and to get a better intuitive sense of which things are likely to lead to long-term sustained retention and long-term behavior change on the part of your users. So that's really what I'm hoping you will go away with today. One of the reasons that is so important is because our cultural intuitions about motivation are pretty off. The way our society is structured has given us some ideas about how people are motivated, which end up not actually bearing out in the research and what we see in the real world. So both in schooling and also in our careers, things are set up to be very extrinsically motivating, which means we're given a goal that we work towards, and the goal is something that we need very badly, versus making systems where enjoying the process is the important part. And that's a more intrinsically motivating way to think about things. Because our society is set up with that more extrinsic focus, we sort of start to believe that that is human nature, that humans must be most motivated by these extrinsic rewards because that's what we see around us. And especially those of us who have been very successful in school and our careers doubly think that, because we can think of examples in our own lives where it's like, oh, yeah, that we had that extrinsic reward, and then that's how we managed to do this thing. So that has trained our intuition in a way that is inaccurate, and that makes us worse at evaluating feature ideas and their ability to create the effects that we want. So I want to help you rethink how motivation works so that your product can work for the majority of users rather than a small subset. And the key to understanding that is this difference between extrinsic incentives and intrinsic incentives. As we're thinking about how things are currently set up in society, one really great example of something that we all did and probably all worked for us that was very extrinsic was being given pizza for reading 40 books. So because we all had that experience, we definitely read those books and got that pizza. That taught us that this extrinsic reward structure must work. And there's a lot of examples like that in our society that have trained us to have that expectation. But the interesting thing is to think about is who thrives within that extrinsic structure. And the people who thrive within that extrinsic structure are people who are very good at figuring out why that task is meaningful to them and what the intrinsic reward is for them. And I think most of us in the room are fairly good at that. And if we think about our jobs, we have our job in our career because, we need money for all of the things in life like housing, food, healthcare. That's important to us. If we didn't have a job, we wouldn't have those things that we really need. And so that is inherently extrinsic, inherently coercive, and we have this job because we need that to survive. But we have found jobs and careers that we find very interesting and that are intrinsically motivating to us. So every day when we show up to work, we're not thinking about, oh, I need the amount of money that one day of work gets me, and that's why I'm showing up today. We're showing up because we're really bought into the project. We really love lots of aspects of our job, even if it's stressful, even if there's things we don't like about it. We're very committed to our careers and take a lot of joy out of the things that we do every day. And that's why we're showing up every day. We're not really showing up for that paycheck. So we have all figured out our own intrinsic reason to be at this job. And that's why we can enjoy it. That's why we feel very motivated in our job. But we don't want to make our users do all of that work. And so that's a really important aspect. We could just hold out for users who are really good at doing that work. And so that's going to be a small fraction of the population. But we generally want to affect as many people as possible. And so that's why we want to do that work for them. How do we make our products intrinsically motivating to our users so that we're hitting more people? One other reason that our intuitions are a little off base on this is because of the gamification movement that came around in the early teens. We were told that gamification is the way to increase user retention engagement, and it's just a panacea to solve all problems. And it does work in specific places. And when I'm talking about that classic gamification, I'm talking about things like having points, badges, rewards, those types of features that people sort of tacked onto their product at that time. A lot of fitness apps were like that. If you ever used a fitness app around 2012, you would have experienced this. And this can work really well for people who are already doing a task and want to really optimize their performance. So someone who is walking 5,000 steps a day and wants to really get those 10,000 steps in. And it just helps them push them a little bit to something that they already feel fairly comfortable in, they're already doing it, and just to optimize that performance for them. So it can be helpful for that group of people. But again, that's a smaller group of people. And for me, in my career, it's much more interesting to understand what gets people off the couch and walking around the block that first time. And how do you get people who are not identified as being good at that thing interested and engaged in it for the first time? So that's where I've focused my career. The one thing that's useful for all of us to do is to think about an example in our minds of a behavior that we want to change in our lives. So think about something that you've thought for a long time that you should do that you're not doing. And this isn't something like going from doing 5K to doing a marathon, assuming those are different things. I have no idea because I do not run. But those things that just really you haven't engaged with at all. So for me, it would be stopping eating sugar. Sugar is something that I rely on a lot in my life and is very important to me. So stopping eating sugar is, for me, one of them. Exercising more could be one. Using cloth towels instead of paper towels. All those kinds of things. So just have that in your mind of what your should is. And when we, as an industry, have thought about how to get people to do things, the thing that we've been very good at understanding and developing is friction reduction. So when we think about people doing an activity, we think about the amount of friction it takes to do the activity, the amount of motivation it takes, and if there is less friction than there is motivation, then someone will do it. But we've only focused as an industry on half of that problem, reducing friction. What I want us to move towards as an industry is now focusing on increasing motivation. So that other half of that piece. So how do we increase motivation? And with my sugar example, I can reduce the friction by making sure there's no cookies in my house. So that's how I can reduce the friction. But I can still walk to the store if I want them badly enough. And so we need to get that last piece. So friction reduction can be part of the way there. And now I want us to get the rest of the way there through increasing the motivation as well. So that's a great question. How do you increase motivation? Because that is not something we spend a lot of time as an industry on. And one of the theories that I like to look at when thinking about this is the theory of planned behavior. So this is a theory that explains why people choose to engage in a behavior that's different than what they're doing currently. And so there's 3 pieces of the theory of planned behavior. And if you have all of these pieces, the theory is that then you engage in the behavior. And those pieces are your personal attitude towards the behavior needs to be positive. Do you think it's a good thing to do? The second one is, do you think your friends and neighbors think it's a good thing to do? And do you think that they're doing it? Or are you going to be a weirdo for doing this thing? So there's this social normative aspect of the behavior. And then the third thing is your belief in your own ability to accomplish this behavior. So how much self-confidence do you have around this behavior? How much self-efficacy do you have around this behavior? And when I see people doing campaigns to change people's behaviors, what I often see is people giving more information to people. Now, think about your behavior and think about whether there's any more information I could give you to convince you that this behavior is a good idea. For me, sugar, I know it's a bad idea. I am very worried about how sugar increases my risk for all of these horrifying diseases that people get in later in their years. And so I am pretty sold on the fact that eating sugar is very bad for me. There's no more information I need on that. I'm even pretty convinced that a lot of people I know are keto and also on this bandwagon of trying to lower sugar. So those are the 2 things that you could affect in an informational campaign. You could let me know that this behavior is good, and you can let me know that everyone around me thinks this is good. But that still hasn't changed my behavior. I'm still doing this, and that's really interesting. So that nothing you could tell me is going to change this at all. So what is missing? And what's missing is that self-efficacy piece. Do I believe I am the type of person who can do this? Do I have confidence that I can do this? Do I have confidence in my willpower? All of these things. So then, for us as product people, the next question is, well, how do you build self-efficacy? And one of the main pieces in building self-efficacy is giving people permission to fail. Because one of the things about self-efficacy is that we have a lot of beliefs about ourselves that are confronted when we try and make a behavior change. And if we think about getting a raise, right? If you want a raise, you really are tying that raise to your performance. So if I don't get that raise, it means I am bad at my job, that my boss doesn't like me, that people don't appreciate me. It means all these things about me as a person. So failing to get that raise is not an option, regardless of even the monetary value of the raise. But because it so closely reflects on my value, that's going to make failing not an option. So we have to create a system where failing becomes interesting data rather than a horrible failure, or rather than something that's going to be punished, or rather than something that's going to reflect on my ego and who I think I am as a person. And this is why games are really interesting, because games have created a system that would be completely boring if you were 100% successful at them. If the first time you played a game, you played it perfectly all the way through, guarantee you're not going to play the next game in that series, right? That would be so boring. And that's because there's nothing to learn, because games are all about failing and learning from your failure and being able to apply that learning to the next time. And this is because games make that failing interesting. Failing in a game is an interesting piece of data, and you can then learn from that and try something else differently. So it doesn't reflect on your ability to play a game if you don't do it perfectly all the way through, because that's just not an expectation you have in a game system. And the thing that really helps support that is that feedback and how to make that failure interesting to people rather than making that failure feel bad to people. It's one of the reasons that games have moved away from this idea of permadeath, which is if you fail at a level, you have to start the whole game over again, because people were finding that too grueling and not very interesting and overly punitive. So even games have had to learn how to work on making failure more and more interesting for people. The best book for all of you to read is called Glued to Games by Scott Rigby. He goes into a lot of detail on how to build really robust feedback systems. And it doesn't matter whether or not you're making games, whether or not you intend to gamify your product, really understanding how to design a good feedback system is really critical to anyone making products. And I'm going to go over it very briefly, but his whole book is about this and goes in a lot of detail. So super recommend checking that out. So Scott Rigby uses self-determination theory as a basis for understanding feedback. And he suggests that for your users to be sort of maximally interested in the feedback, there are 3 different areas that you give them feedback around. One is you're giving them feedback on their competency. And competency is sort of what we would normally think about as feedback, sort of how well you're doing. Sort of how much time did you take? How many points did you get? All of that is competency feedback. That's a pretty straightforward thing that we think about when we think about feedback. The second one is autonomy, and this one's a little trickier to understand. So autonomy feedback is how much of an effect do I have over the system? How much do my actions change the world around me? So a really great real life example of amazing autonomy feedback is pushing over a box of cereal and spilling it all over the place. That is super fun because you get a lot of feedback around how your small action created a big, meaningful result. And so that's why that type of thing has an element to it that's very compelling. And then the third one is relatedness. And so this is about how connected you feel to other people. And as an industry, we pretty much have this down because we know that a great hack for retention in our products is just making it social. Just throw in some social stuff and that's going to just improve the experience dramatically for people. And that's because one element of that feedback system is how close I feel to other people and how do I feel like I'm connecting to other people. So those are the sort of 3 areas that you really want to make sure you're getting robust feedback in. And so I'm going to give an example of a product that we don't think about traditionally as gamified, but that has applied these underlying principles to why games are effective into their product. And posting on Facebook is the example I'm going to use. So just the sort of act of posting on Facebook and how that's incentivized. So I make a post on Facebook, I throw it out there, and then I get likes. And likes are a great metric that tell me how well I'm connecting with my audience, whether my audience is a professional audience or whether it's my friends and family, whichever one of those I care about. I get feedback on whether or not they liked it, how well I'm doing at connecting with them through that like button. It's very quantitative, measurable, and then I can try out different things and see which things get more likes. And that's how I can learn to better connect with the people I care about. So another aspect of posting is that autonomy feedback. So I have created this tiny little post that is like a little window into my world, and I have like thrown it onto Facebook, and then hundreds of people see it in their newsfeed. I have done this little action, and it's really affected the system. And that's amazing that I can be a content creator that any little idea I have can get seen by hundreds of people, and that's really compelling. The third aspect of posting on Facebook is the relatedness. And the relatedness primarily is coming in the comments, because that's a much more qualitative feeling of being connected to people. I get to know more about how they're responding and why. And so that's that relatedness feedback that I'm getting through posting on Facebook. So that's sort of a system within Facebook that is very compelling. And if we took a minute and decided to redesign Facebook from scratch using the more coercive mechanisms and the more extrinsic mechanisms of the sort of classic gamification movement, let's see, as a product manager at Facebook, I'm like, okay, the thing that we've noticed is people are most successful in our system if we have them post 3 times a day. So we really want people to post 3 times a day. So I'm going to give them 10 points every time they post, and I'm going to give them streaks for any day that they post above 3 times or above. And so I'm going to just have a dashboard, and they're going to see all that. And if we think through what that experience would feel like, so those points are sort of meaningless. They're not connected to anything we care about. I can't get better at something. I can just do it more. So I'm not getting anything interesting out of knowing that I got points for it. And then the streaks, once I break my streak, that's going to start feeling awful. It's like, okay, I did this, I was really invested in this, and then I lost that. And so that's one reason that people often rage quit, is that feeling of loss when they've really invested in something and the only thing that they got out of it has disappeared. So we can see that if we just applied that sort of traditional gamified system that is that extrinsic system, that's not going to be as compelling, and we're probably not going to be using Facebook for as long as we do nowadays. So I want you to think about that when you're thinking about your products. Are you creating the intrinsic reason? Are you making it interesting for people to be in the system? Are they learning anything? Can they be getting better at something? Or are you just trying to reward them for doing the behaviors you want, or trying to coerce them in other ways? So those are really the things to be thinking about, is how do you make something intrinsically motivating for your users so that they really love your products and stick with them for a long time? All right, thank you all so much. And at the moment, I'm doing a bunch of consulting and contracting. So if you're interested in learning more, you can email me, heather@behavioralproductdesign.com. And also, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you. Thank you so much.